I made two promises to the people of New York. I said, first, we will not rest until everyone who gouged the city or who enabled its gouging is held accountable. And I said, second, we will not rest until, one way or another, every penny of fraud is recovered and returned to the city. I can now report that while the criminal case against 8 defendants is still pending, we have now made good on our pledge to make the city whole. In short, today, the people of New York City have more than 500 million reasons to celebrate. And that is because, as reflected in papers approved by a federal judge just a few minutes ago, we have reached an agreement with the lead contractor on the Citytime project, Science Applications International Corporation, or SAIC. As part of what is known as a deferred prosecution agreement, SAIC has agreed to pay more than $500 million in restitution and penalties, and to forgive more than $40 million in payments that the city would otherwise owe to SAIC arising out of the Citytime project. This resolution is, as far as our office is aware, the largest by dollar amount arising out of any state or local government contract fraud in history. It is also a resolution that ensures, as promised, that every penny of fraud will be returned to the city and that the city will be made whole. Before going into further details about what happened today in court, let me again introduce our law enforcement team. I am joined here by our extraordinary partner, in this case and so many others, Rose Gilhern, the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Investigation. I've been the United States Attorney for a little over 2.5 years now, and I cannot think of a case where I have been more proud of the partnership that we have built and of the speed and the thoroughness of the investigation that these professionals have conducted at my office and at the Department of Investigation. Commissioner Hearn deserves enormous amounts of credit for her leadership in uncovering graft and corruption in this city, and her dedicated staff should be applauded by every New Yorker for helping to get us to this point. And so let me thank the dedicated members of DOI who have worked on this matter, including Assistant Deputy Commissioner John Cantor, Deputy Commissioner for Legal Affairs Marjorie Landa, First Deputy General Counsel Michael Siller, Associate Commissioner Yuval Hipshush, Auditors Lila Yu, Maggie Zhu, Calvin Lamb, and Renard McDowell, Inspector General Chris Gratina, and Special Investigators Corey Peel and Matt Beffert. In addition, I want to express my gratification and appreciation for the fine career prosecutors in my office who have worked tirelessly on this matter for a long time now and continue to actively investigate it. Assistant U.S. Attorneys Howard Master and Andrew Goldstein, led by the Chief of our Public Corruption Unit, Brendan McGuire, and the Chief of our Asset Forfeiture Unit, Sharon Cohen-Levin. I also want to thank the criminal investigators from our office, Bob Ryan and Ron Gardella, who have done an outstanding job assisting this investigation in so many other ways as well. Every New Yorker should be pleased that these government workers serve them so well every day. Just to give you a sense of scale, by the way, the recovery that we are announcing today in this one case alone represents 10 times the annual budget of this U.S. Attorney's Office. You will also hear from Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who was here in his capacity as Commissioner Hearn's boss and as the representative for the victim in this case, the City of New York. The mayor asked to be here to thank the fine career investigators and federal prosecutors who worked so hard to get us to this point. Now let me just spend a couple of minutes on some of the details related to today's filings. Since announcing the first set of criminal charges less than 15 months ago, our team has forged ahead with a full-scale investigation of SAIC, interviewing dozens of witnesses, and reviewing hundreds of thousands of pages of documents in this case. What they uncovered was a fraudster's field day that lasted 7 years. As a result of the hard work of the people standing behind me and others, we have reached a welcome agreement, as I mentioned, with SAIC. In essence, the company has taken responsibility for the fraud of its former employees and agreed to make full amends to the city. In particular, the terms of the deferred prosecution agreement filed in federal court are as follows. SAIC has agreed to forfeit more than $500 million to the government, or to be precise, $500,392,977. It has agreed on top of that to forgive an additional $40 million that was invoiced but not yet paid in connection with the Citytime project, agreed to cooperate fully with authorities in connection with the pending criminal case, agreed to adopt a series of internal reforms, including protections for whistleblowers and installing better mechanisms for the reporting of fraud, agreed to the appointment of an independent monitor to ensure that this type of misconduct never happens again, agreed to take responsibility for not fully investigating suspicions of kickbacks and fraud dating back to 2005, and agreed to the filing of criminal charges in federal court, which will be dismissed only if the company complies fully with all of the terms of the agreement for at least 3 years. Should SAIC meet all of these obligations, the company, fail to meet these obligations, the company itself will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Part of the written agreement with the company is an extensive statement of responsibility. In that statement, SAIC admits significant failures of management to follow up on red flags in connection with the Citytime project. Among other things, the company admits that its, quote, failures resulted in part from an overemphasis on the financial and operational success of the Citytime project by those assigned to manage the project at the expense of the company's own ethics, human resources, and procurement policies. In short, the investigation revealed that SAIC managers responsible for Citytime placed profit ahead of principle, time and time again. That is why we insisted that the company pay from its own pocket every penny of the massive fraud perpetrated against the city. And that is why, by the close of business tomorrow, SAIC will make a total forfeiture payment of more than $500 million, which includes a restitution amount of at least $370 million and a penalty of $130 million, and virtually all of it will go to the city of New York. $500,000 is a staggering sum, but it is a sum commensurate with the staggering scale of the crimes and misconduct that we uncovered. And it is an amount, as I've said, that makes the city whole. It represents essentially all of the money that the city overpaid to SAIC, plus a penalty. It leaves the city with a functioning, web-based timekeeping system, and it enables the city to achieve this outstanding result at a time of real need for the city, without having to incur any further expense or delay in litigating this matter with SAIC or others involved in the fraud. Now, SAIC, as you may know, is a Fortune 500 company, employs 41,000 people, and generates a whopping 93% of its business from government contracts. And it has now learned a costly lesson that it never pays to put profits over ethics. The company avoided outright indictment only because of its full cooperation with the investigation, its lack of history of similar conduct, and its commitment to making things right and making sure nothing like this ever happens again at SAIC. We hope that other corporations, and especially those who make their money from the government or do business with the city, learn that lesson as well. But we also remain committed, of course, to holding the individuals involved in these crimes to account so that they are appropriately punished and so that they do not profit from these alleged crimes. I should also note, before ending, that on top of the $500 million payment by SAIC and on top of the $40 million amount in forgiven invoices, we have so far seized, frozen, or placed liens on over $52 million in cash and properties controlled by the individual defendants that were allegedly linked to the schemes. And we intend to take all steps necessary to make sure that all of those defendants' ill-gotten gains are forfeited. So overall, the effective total recovery in this case, when all is said and done, could approach $600 million. So in conclusion, while we have achieved our goals of making the city whole, our efforts to identify and hold to account every individual responsible continues, and we will not consider our job done until we get that job done. The citizens of the city of New York, the greatest city on earth, have a right to expect that they will not be brazenly defrauded. And for all of us standing up here, who are not just prosecutors and investigators, but people who live and work in this great city, it is especially and personally gratifying to bring so much back to the city that we all love. And so let me call to the podium Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Great, thank you. Today's settlement, I think it goes without saying, is a major victory for taxpayers And just as importantly, it is a major victory for justice and public integrity. Our administration has zero tolerance for corruption. We have set the highest standards for city employees and contractors, and we expect every single person to abide by them. Of course, we know there'll always be some bad apples who try to game the system, and that's why when I first came into office, I hired Rose Gilhern to run the city's Department of Investigation. She is now the longest-serving DOI Commissioner in city history, and I have no doubt the most effective. Without a lot of fanfare and without a lot of media notice, she's turned DOI into a national and international model. There is no one more committed to protecting the integrity of government, no one more devoted to rooting out corruption than Commissioner Rose Gilhern. And she could have no stronger partner than our outstanding attorney, Preet Bharara. After Commissioner Gilhern and her team at the city's Department of Investigation began to uncover the fraud in Citytime project that was being perpetrated on the public, they contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. And together, these two offices conducted a sweeping probe that exposed a massive fraud being perpetrated on city government and the public. And thanks to their partnership, we are a big step closer to ensuring that justice is served. This is the largest award the DOI has ever recovered. And I just want to thank Rose and Preet and everyone in their offices for pursuing this case as aggressively as they did, and for refusing to settle for anything less than fair restitution and an admission of culpability. Last June, I sent a letter to SAIC's CEO demanding that New York City, as the victim of this crime, be reimbursed for all of the fraud and overbilling on this project. And I also met with the CEO to deliver the same message. This settlement, plus other funds we hope to recover, including assets that have already been frozen, will largely achieve that goal. I also want to point out that in addition to getting repaid for the amount the city was defrauded, we have also gotten what we set out to create: a functioning, automated timekeeping system that saves taxpayers money. The project is complete, and there are now more than 160,000 New York City employees using the Citytime system. Now, I think the lesson to take away from this is, if you attempt to defraud the public, you will be caught, you will regret it, and you will face justice. From the very first days of our administration, our focus has not only been on rooting out corruption, but on preventing it from occurring in the first place. In 2002, Commissioner Gilhern and DOI launched a corruption prevention program that over the past decade had helped us run the cleanest administration in New York City's history. We are very proud of that. We take ethics very seriously, and we've adopted some of the most comprehensive anti-corruption laws in the country, from lobbying reforms to limits on campaign contributions from those who do business with the city, to tougher penalties for those who violate the ethics and conflict of interest laws. Preventing corruption is a top priority, and thanks in large part to Rose, we have been extraordinarily successful. But in the few instances where we can't prevent it, we are committed to rooting it out and bringing the perpetrators to justice, and that's exactly what has been done here. The public is absolutely right to expect all government employees and contractors to abide by the highest standards. By preventing and rooting out corruption, we not only strengthen the public faith in our city government, we make our city an even more attractive place for small businesses and large corporations to invest and create jobs. A culture of honesty and integrity is essential to attracting customers. That's just as true in government as it is in business. And I'm going to leave all the questions about the criminal probe to the U.S. Attorney and Commissioner Gilhern. Any questions for me, I will take at a later time. But this is a good day for New York City. We have a functioning system, and in the end, at a very reasonable cost. Preet, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And now I call to the podium Commissioner Rose Gilhern.
Thank you very much, Preet. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here. I am sure it is meaningful to the people of the city that you have followed this matter so closely. And as it relates to the work DOI has done bringing integrity to city government during this administration, I have followed your lead. I am so pleased to have participated with the people standing here today in getting back this money for the people of the city of New York. This formidable team stayed the course and step by step brought about this most powerful action. It is a good day for government and a good day for our city. The initiative DOI took in connection with our concerns about the Citytime project was to trace the money paid by the city for the project, and within a year, our forensic auditors uncovered millions of dollars going to a suspicious network of shell companies and overseas bank accounts for people seemingly unconnected to the project. With that, I referred the case, including the prime vendor, SAIC, to this federal prosecutor's office, which is my former office. And I am delighted that I did, because we could not have had better partners in law enforcement, and we could not have had a better result for the city. The dollar amounts announced today are staggering, and as today's court proceeding demonstrated, they also reflect the progress of this investigation. I want to thank my colleagues at DOI for their relentless work on this investigation, and the assistant U.S. attorneys for the time and energy they have put into this sophisticated case. Preet, Rich Zabel, Deputy U.S. Attorney, Brenda McGuire, Chief of the Public Corruption Unit, and Sharon Cohen-Levin, Chief of the Asset Forfeiture Unit. You have been enormously generous in striving to have the city get the maximum recovery, and I am deeply grateful. The city did indeed get its timekeeping and payroll system, Citytime, which cost the city approximately $600 million. But what transpired during the course of this project was shameless. The project was riddled with fraud and improprieties, and SAIC took no steps to do anything about it. Let's also keep in mind that 2 SAIC officials have been charged during the investigation, and one of them has pled guilty and is cooperating. This nearly $500 million recovery sends a message to vendors like SAIC that this type of fraud, if it occurs in this city, DOI will pursue you as resolutely as we did in this case, and with the full force of the law that you see here today. At the same time, I also want to acknowledge SAIC and its representatives for taking responsibility and coming to the table to do what is right. It is indeed troubling to learn of problems in our city contracts or programs. That doesn't make them bad contracts or programs. We have an obligation to find any issues, as we did here, and address them, as we did here. The citizens of this city expect that and are gratified to know that there is recourse based on announcements like this one today. What has been done to tackle crime in this city is also being done on the corruption front. We pledge to continue to pursue additional financial recoveries from other wrongdoers in the Citytime case. But suffice it to say, securing a financial recovery to the city coffers this sizable will benefit all 8.4 million New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Happy to take your questions. Yeah. As I said previously when we announced the charges against the Allens, as in every other case, when we have defendants who are fugitives and who are abroad somewhere, we take every step possible to bring them here and call them to account for the crimes with which they're charged, and we've done that in this case, and we're seeking their extradition. Yeah.
Can you break down the amounts of money, including the $41 million? Is the U.S. getting any money in fines?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to get bogged down in the numbers because depending on what you're looking at, it can get a little bit complicated, and it's all laid out, I think, pretty clearly in the documents that were unsealed today relating to the deferred prosecution agreement and some other documents. But essentially, we're talking about a payment by SAIC of a little bit over $500 million, the forgiveness of $40 million. So that comes to about $540. As I also said, we have taken action against bank accounts and property to the tune of about $52 million. That has not been resolved yet. Those are still in litigation. We hope to be able to get that full amount. Basically, what's going to the city is the difference between what was invoiced, or not what was invoiced, but what was the contracted price for the Citytime project to be completed as of about 2003, and the total amount paid to SAIC over the course of 2003 to 2010. So basically, what this agreement and resolution does with respect to the investigation is gives back to the city basically the total amount that was paid above and beyond what was supposed to be paid as of 2003 and wipes out that 7-year period of fraud.
I'm sorry, to clarify, can you just give us the number for how much you believe was actually stolen as compared to the number that's being returned?
It's hard to specify specifically the total amount stolen because, as we have alleged a number of times, this entire project was rife with fraud and pervasive with fraud. We think we have gotten to a number that represents the total amount that makes both the city whole and provides for a penalty. Keeping in mind, of course, that there's an actual product that was delivered that has some value. It's impossible to pinpoint with complete accuracy what that product is worth or would have been worth had it been done without pervasive fraud and every penny of the fraud. But if you look at the overall numbers, you get an understanding of why we reached the settlement that we did. It makes the city whole with respect to all the money it overpaid over basically a 7-year period. There's also a penalty amount involved, and there's also additional amounts that I've mentioned that we, with DOI and the Marshal Service, are seizing and attempting to forfeit. Yeah.
Now, in addition to the Allens, there are a number of other criminal defendants. What's the status of those cases?
Yeah, there are 8 criminal defendants whose case is still pending, and I don't think a trial date has been set. Trial date has not been set, but they are presumed innocent until proven guilty, and that trial will happen at some point in the future. Yeah.
In an earlier complaint, it said that the city had paid well over $600 million. There was talk at the time of $700 million, but today I'm hearing the number of $600 million. What specifically has the city paid?
Some of the confusion may arise from who the city paid that money to. Some money was paid to SAIC. There was another contractor, one or more other contractors as well. I don't know if the commissioner wants to address the issue of how much overall the city paid to everyone, all things included with respect to this project. I don't have that number in front of me.
It's between 6 and 700 million.
The commissioner says between 600 and 700 million. But remember, not every penny of it was paid to SAIC. Yeah.
You mentioned the seizure on some of Mark Mazur's one of the defendant's properties, but he worked for an entirely different company, Spirion, the quality assurance group. Have you gone after any of the money the city supposedly overpaid to Spirion as well, which I think was a total about maybe $55–60 million?
We are pursuing. I don't know what we have, what's in the documents that have been released today, but we're pursuing, as you can see from the action taken today, money from every single place where we think it shouldn't have gone. Yeah. Yes, you.
Technodyne was a subcontractor, I think, of SAIC, is that correct? Is SAIC effectively paying today money that was taken by Technodyne?
That and more, yes. Yeah.
Are there any possibility of further charges or arrests coming down the pipeline on either people on the SAIC side or city officials or anyone involved?
Yeah, this investigation remains ongoing. That doesn't mean that there will be charges. It doesn't mean that there won't be charges. But as in every case, we pursue the facts where they lead us. When we first made the announcement in December of 2010, I think it was, there were a certain number of people charged, and we've now superseded, I think twice. But I'm not in a position to say anything about that beyond what I've said. Yeah.
2 questions. First, what's the total number of people who've been charged?
There were 11 defendants who were charged, plus Technodyne, the entity. 1 individual passed away before trial. 2 individuals have pled guilty, and so 8 are pending.
Okay. And also, do you think this fraud was preventable?
One hopes that all fraud is preventable, but as laid out in some detail in the documents that are unsealed today and the previous documents where we allege a lot of fraud, the theory of the fraud is pretty clear. And the company here made very clear in the admission of responsibility, which I urge you to read because it's an interesting document, goes on at great length about all the ways in which controls were not in place at the company, about ways in which the culture at the company was not what it should have been, and that people, as we allege in our own court documents, went above and beyond and out of their way to create shell companies and to engage in kickbacks and to lie, basically lie, cheat, and steal to get all this money. So it was a pretty elaborate fraud, and I think the documents speak for themselves. Yeah.
The Citytime aberration as far as SAIC went, as you mentioned, this company has numerous other contracts with the federal government. Are any of those being looked at?
I'm not going to comment beyond what's in the public documents.
Do you know, sir, if SAIC broke even on this as a result of funds is now losing money for all this, or was still profitable as a result of dealing with the city?
It's my understanding, and the fine folks to my right will correct me if I'm wrong, that SAIC expected to make, over the course of the number of years that this project was underway, a profit of about $60 million. They have now paid out of pocket, as I've announced today, $500 million. So they didn't make that profit, and they're out a substantial amount beyond that, multiple times that. Yeah. We engage in large settlements out of this office on a not infrequent basis. This is the largest of its kind that we're aware of, as I mentioned before. And bear in mind, for those of you who are not familiar with deferred prosecution agreements, what that means. Criminal charges were actually consented to be filed in court today. So there's a criminal charge pending in federal court. What we have agreed to do, based on all the representations made by the company and commitments made by the company, which are laid out at great length, and some of which I mentioned in my earlier remarks, they have to abide by all of that, including cooperation and a change in procedures at the company and protections for whistleblowers and all sorts of other things for at least 3 years or until the criminal cases are finished, for us not to prosecute them. So at the end of that time, if they have not complied fully with all their obligations and requirements, only then will the criminal charges be dismissed. Yeah.
The forfeiture complaint that was filed today, is that effectively the $52 million that you're pursuing, or is there other money?
I don't know if that adds up. It's a piece of it. Yeah, I don't think that represents all of it. There have been other filings in the case, and if you need them, if they're publicly filed, you can call the press office and we can get them to you.
And what happens next on this what has to happen before you can seize those assets?
There's a process that's in place, and the criminal case has to unfold. It's a legal process. You can't just, in America, take people's money on your say-so, and people have a right to object to it, and people have a right to the legal process before money is seized and, in fact, forfeited. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one question. I don't know if the mayor would care to comment. Since this fraud apparently went on for 7 years, whether you've been able to ascertain what failings of oversight by city officials who didn't catch it throughout all this period of time, and what your administration has done to remedy those failures, if any exist?
We take it very seriously. We look back and see how it was perpetrated. Should we have known? Could we have known? We keep strengthening all of our surveillance, and hopefully we'll catch anything that happens again. In the end, it was caught, and while you're always subject to fraud, hopefully people will be more attentive the next time than in the past.
Along those lines, does DOI have any specific recommendations that the city should be taking to prevent this type of fraud in the future? I know DOI has been praised quite a bit here for rooting this out, but as the last questioner asked, there were a bunch of people who say that the city failed to police this contract properly, and there are a bunch of other high-dollar contracts out there that critics say are also not being.
Yes, we always make those kinds of recommendations based on observations in our cases, and we've done that. Deputy Mayor Kaz Holloway in October testified before the City Council with a 25 or so point program that he is implementing and is still studying as it relates to the procurement and management of large citywide IT projects. His testimony is available on the City Council website, and we have it as well. But a couple of the points that resonate from this case include clear and identifiable milestones and payments not being made beyond milestones not met, standardizing contract language, not permitting large contracts to have different language just to fit as they go along, and to have standardized contract terms, and also to break some of these large citywide projects up into segments so that we don't become wholly reliant on any one vendor. So those are a couple of the measures that are under consideration and being applied across the board. But in addition, I urge you to take a look at the lengthier and more granular analysis that Deputy Mayor Holloway has engaged in. And for him, I know that it's still a work in progress as well.
Mr. U.S. Attorney, do you have a sense that IT contracts are more vulnerable to corruption than other contracts? And I'm thinking, the average person probably knows a car goes for about $25,000, $35,000. An IT timekeeping system could cost $50 million or $500 million. Is there a sense that IT is more vulnerable?
I think any contract, any project has unique vulnerabilities in it, and it depends on the integrity and the ethics of the company who you're contracting with. It depends on the controls that are in place, as has been mentioned. I don't know that there's anything specific about IT contracts, although of course, just as a common sense matter, when someone is contracting to build a bridge, people can see the progress of the bridge because you can see it, and you can see the brick and mortar. With an IT contract that exists in, a cyberspace region, it's a little bit harder to see what the progress has been, and you have to rely on experts and consultants, as is normal. So I suppose that's a particular vulnerability on IT contracts. So, we spend some time paying attention to those kinds of contracts for that reason. I don't know that it's any worse than all sorts of fraud and graft that has been uncovered by DOI and our office and prosecutors' offices around the country for hundreds of years, long before computers were even in place. Yeah, last question.
Last week brought the release of the DOI report about CEDCO and its fraudulent job placement numbers. And I'm wondering, is there any sense that intense pressure within City Hall for the success of major initiatives can create conditions that contribute to these types of frauds?
I have no comment on anything beyond this case.
We have an obligation to do the best job that we can for the people of New York City, and we are not going to lose sight of that. We expect all our employees, the way the public expects me, to work as hard as we can to do as good a job as we can, and that is no excuse for fraud. In the case of CEDCO, it was a de minimis percentage of all of the jobs, but even that we're not going to tolerate, and we'll go and see what remedies we have. Take a look at whether our procedures should have caught something earlier, but I think it's fair to say that when you have as many contracts and they're so big, there will always be one or two bad apples, whether it's one or two bad companies, suppliers, customers, employees, but we're not going to tolerate any corruption, and we'll go after all of it. Hopefully we prevent it, but if we don't prevent it, we'll make sure that we catch it and get restitution. We start out for the year after this with something like a $3 billion deficit projected, so this will help close that. We also have a problem that our budget, while we think we'll be able to come to a balanced budget on time, is still going to be a budget where we have to make choices of either or. We're not going to be able to do as many things this time as we would like to do, and that's certainly going to be true for the foreseeable future. So this is not free money that we can all of a sudden go out and spend. This money was spent a long time ago. We've just got to find some other ways, including this, of catching up. I wish we'd found $500 million in a more pleasant way, but it will go to help close next year's budget or the year after's budget.
Thanks, everybody.